Hello Open Door. For our devotional today we are going to be looking at a couple of verses from Isaiah. It's chapter 43 verses 18 to 19 and they are verses that I think are full of hope and I'm going to tell you why. But to start with, let's read them. Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing, now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? The prophet Isaiah is speaking to Israel, who've been exiled in Babylon for many years. Considering the amount of time that they had been away from their homeland, they may well have felt that God had forgotten them and was never going to rescue them. They remembered the stories of the Exodus from Egypt and wanted God to do the same thing for them, to rescue them from the Babylonians and make the way for them to go home. This was their hope. If God had done it once, then surely he could do it again. So where was he? Why hadn't he rescued them yet? It was not that God had forgotten them. Isaiah clearly says in the chapters before this and after this that God is going to rescue them from the Babylonians and take them home. But you see, God had bigger purposes than just that kind of rescue. The Israelites didn't see that their main problem wasn't that they were in captivity, but that their disobedience had landed them there in the first place. God doesn't just want to rescue them and take them back to where they were before, so they can make the same mistakes again. He wants to rescue them in a much bigger way, in a way that will save them from themselves. And so he says through Isaiah, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. He's telling Israel to forget the way that he rescued their ancestors from Egypt. He's telling them that that was a one-time event, that this time he's going to do something different, something new, something better. See, I'm doing a new thing, now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? God isn't in the business of doing the same old things in the same old ways. We like the certainty of what we know, but God is a creator God, and he does new things. So what is this new thing that he's going to do? In chapter 43 of Isaiah, and in fact throughout Isaiah, he reveals himself to be the only Redeemer and Saviour of Israel and the world. He's going to effect a rescue that will result in the Israelites being forgiven from their sins, those things that had separated them from God. It is a rescue that will bring them back into relationship with God, and it's going to result in true life. You see, in verse 19, it says that he will make rivers in the desert. And in verse 20, it says there'll be water in the wilderness. Now, what do we know about water? We know that water is the source of life. Without water, nothing lives. And this points to Jesus, because Jesus calls himself the water of life. This chapter and the ones surrounding it don't just point to the physical rescue of Israel from Babylon, but they point to the ultimate rescue and redemption that Jesus brings, and that we're looking forward to celebrating at Easter in a couple of weeks' time. This was a new thing that God was doing. And this is our ultimate hope, that God, through Jesus, has rescued us and continues to rescue, redeem and save us from everything that separates us from him, from our actions, from sickness, death, decay, and from all those things that Satan does to try and draw us away from God. So that's the ultimate hope of this verse, the ultimate hope that Jesus is our Saviour and our Redeemer. But God's been bringing this verse to my mind over and over again in the last couple of weeks. And I think it's because this is a verse for this season of life. And it contains hope for right now. I said earlier that we like the certainty of what we've always known. And when that's stripped away from us, as it has been so abruptly over the last few weeks, It is unsettling and uncomfortable for everyone. There is pain and there is grief. There's grief for the life that we had that we're no longer having right now. But there's also grief for those who've been badly affected by this coronavirus, those who have experienced their loved ones dying. And we shouldn't dismiss this pain and this grief. It is natural and it is indeed important to feel those things. But I think we also need to hold to the truth that hope exists alongside pain. There is always hope, and as I said last week, God has not stopped working. So 7 months before we were married, Peter's dad died, and it was hard. It was really hard. There was pain and there was grief. Yet in the hardest of times, there was peace that went beyond all understanding, and there was hope too. So when it came to our wedding day 7 months later, we could declare this verse from Song of Songs that says, "See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone, the season of singing has come." It wasn't that we'd worked through all the pain and grief and had come to terms with John's passing. It wasn't that at all. In fact, there are times when grief still rises. What is it, like 7 years later? But it was a promise that God was doing a new thing. There was a new season coming, and it was going to be so good. So what do I think God's saying? I think God is saying that he's going to do a new thing through this current situation. And as his people, we need to be looking for it. I believe he's asking us to hold loosely and in some cases let go of what we knew and did before. And he's asking us to let him reshape and remould our thinking, our assumptions, and what we've always done. While living through this situation, weeping with those who weep and mourning with those who mourn, we are at the same time called to look beyond and see the new thing that God is doing. Sometimes the old has to fall away for the new to spring forth and bear fruit. So to sum up, we have hope. We have our ultimate hope firmly planted in Jesus as the rescuer and redeemer of us and this world. And we have hope for this season right now, that God is doing a new thing, and we, as his people, need to be looking for it. Though there is pain and there is grief, God is working all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes.